On this, the first episode of the second season of Audiobook Club, we discover that former Tory MP Rory Stewart is, in fact, a little bit gangster.
When the US and the UK invaded Iraq in 2003, I was appointed to an Iraqi province, where I operated, at first, as the acting governor. Our money was apparently limitless, in my case delivered in vacuum-packed bricks of $1 million in bills, which I could spend without audit. When things got sticky, 100,000 troops and AC-130 Spectre gunships stood by to back us up.
Hello, I'm Steve Phillips, and welcome to another episode of Audiobook Club, the podcast about audiobooks that always adheres to diplomatic protocols. Today, we shall be scrutinising Politics on the Edge, a political and personal memoir by Rory Stewart, a former tutor to Princes William and Harry, unsuccessful candidate for the position of Prime Minister, and now both a Yale professor and a podcast presenter. To help us navigate our way across this breathtaking landscape of mountains and snow-covered high passes, I'm joined as ever by Matt Layton.
Well, as ever, it's been a while, Steve, and it's lovely to be in the same room as you.
Yes, this is weird. You should go into another room.
I should, because obviously for the first series of Audiobook Club, I was doing it from Adelaide, but
Yes.
I enjoyed it so much that I bought the company. No, I moved back to the UK for us to do this. It's nice to be in the city where all the authors are. It's also very nice and slightly daunting to be sitting. I do radio, Steve. The reason I do radio is because
we look like we do.
well, yeah, exactly. Well, and also the wonky eye stuff, and somebody once said to me that radio is a great thing where people are a bit shy get to talk to lots of people without actually having to look them in the face. And I really enjoy, and I'm sitting here under these lights. We've both gone for cross-legged.
We've both gone for 70s BBC One late night on a Friday.
Yeah. But this is your environment. I don't know what the hell is going on. But I've been away, Steve.
Yes, I was going to say, because, let's pick up where we left off. On our last episode last year, always important to keep the podcast regularity up to at least one episode a year. Yeah. What happened?
Well, you're talking, of course, of the mythical Christmas episode that you keep telling me exists, but I've never heard it. So I actually don't believe it exists. I have no recollection of it. But maybe we should come back and talk about this at the beginning of every episode.
I agree. Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on. Anyway, I thought we'd start off in celebration of our brand new second season. We'll start off with a complaint.
We've had a complaint.
We always get complaints.
We've made it.
Matthew Layton's snide, patronising, demeaning attitude to Michelle Obama's new audiobook was nauseating. When are such attitudes from British male broadcasters going to be regarded as unacceptable? It's actually possible to voice a critical opinion, in brackets, Steve Phillips, of a book while remaining respectful of the author and her work. The fact of the author's female gender may give a clue to the manner of Layton's critique. What have you got to say to that then? Good night.
I'm a broadcaster. That's what I take from that. I think if you listen back to our episode with our lovely friend Helen from Penguin, where we tried our best to review Michelle Obama's book, which frankly is not aimed at us, it's aimed at inspiring young women. And I compared it to President Obama's book, which frankly is for everyone. So it wasn't about a male-female thing. To be honest, it's about the quality of the product and how it spoke to me. So hopefully it was a bit more nuanced than that. But I'm very glad we've had a complaint.
Yeah, I hope that answers your complaint that you left us on Facebook, and I really, really appreciate it. And if I could just carry on inserting something into that gaping old wound that I've just reopened from 18 months ago. I found her book really, I really enjoyed it. It was a real good bedtime book, very soothing voice. It was just, quite
Judas.
Inspiring. Yes, that's it. Book club with Richard and Judas.
Yes.
Can we go there?
Yes, we just have.
Oh, I feel better already about having a camera on, you know. But to that end, we have also been reviewed as well. We've had one review.
We've had a review.
Yes,
I haven't seen this.
Don't hold your breath. Okay, so basically, it is 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, but it said
What?
it's from Sue the Dentist from last June. So finger on the pulse, Steve. I found this looking for something else. Good start. A story of our lives, really. I found this looking for something else in the search bar. It makes me wonder how many other well-presented and well-edited, interesting opinions are out there, and how rubbish my browser function is on Apple Podcasts, which always brings up the same old offerings. So, I mean, I don't know if that's specifically praise for us, but
Hold on, what? We've had a complaint. We've had a review. We've had a quite positive review as far as I'm concerned, and maybe one day we're meant to be aspiring to be the same old rubbish. Okay, and that's when we've really arrived.
I can't wait for the day when we are the same as the aspiring old rubbish.
There you go.
Just to reiterate that, I found this looking for something else, and I wonder how many other shows are out there. I mean, I wasn't really fussed about listening to this one. Anyway, Sue the Dentist, glad you might be with us. But yeah, here we go. Let's kick off the latest episode. So we're reviewing Politics on the Edge. This is a memoir from within by Rory Stewart, narrated by the author. It's 16 hours and 20 minutes long, unabridged, and from Penguin Audio. It was out last September. Matt, your first thoughts?
Well, what we normally do, Steve, is we start by talking about the author and then the book itself and what has been written down. In this case, obviously, as a memoir, as Rory Stewart's memoir, those two are going to be quite closely combined. And then, of course, we move on to what does the audiobook version bring to it? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it richer? Or are you better off without it? And I think in this case, I hope we're going to prove that the audiobook is much better than the tree-based book. So to the author first. And Steve, actually, I've got a complaint about you.
Excellent. Well, let's play this complaint tennis. Okay. Hit me an ace.
You ain't done enough with your life. How old are you now?
26.
By the time he was 26, Roderick James Nugent Stewart, OBE, Rory Stewart, he was born on the 3rd of January 1973. He's a British academic, author and broadcaster and former diplomat and politician. Basically, by the time he got to your claimed age of 26, he had gone to Eton and Oxford. Well, he'd been born in Hong Kong. He'd been to Eton and Oxford. He had been a soldier at the age of 18, short commission in the Highland Regiment. He then became a diplomat in Indonesia, the governor of a province of Iraq. You're falling a little behind, dear boy. He's been a professor at Harvard and Yale. He's held 6 ministerial positions. He used to tutor Princes William and Harry. And frankly, Steve, you've done a podcast.
He's also got a podcast that has sold out the O2 with Alistair Campbell.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we were kids and the Mary Whitehouse Experience, a comedy group, David Baddiel,
Yes. Hugh Dennis, Steve Punt,
Rob Newman.
There we go. There's the
Nailed
quartet.
Nailed it. They were the first to play Wembley, I think, and comedy was the new rock and roll. The good news for you and me now that Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, with their podcast, which is called The Rest is Politics, correct?
Yes.
They are doing a UK tour and they're just about to sell out the O2 Arena. And as you say, now comedy isn't the new rock and roll. 2 middle-aged men sitting talking to each other is the new rock and roll, Steve.
Yeah.
2 middle-aged blokes sitting talking to each other is the new rock and roll, i.e. there's hope for us yet.
Yes, okay, when we talk about the O2, I mean, potentially, we could just stick a sign up above the local village hall and probably get 8 people.
So, funnily enough, all these other things that he's achieved, I've been away, Steve, as we've just mentioned. I've been out of the country for 7 years. And the key parts of this book, the beginning and the end of this book is, the key moment is the television debate in which Rory Stewart was up against four other men in suits to become, hopefully, leader of the Conservative Party. And history has shown that Boris Johnson won all that. Now, for me, I wasn't there. I was in Australia. I wasn't getting the nuance. I was going, who's that young upstart? And it was only on the 11th of October last year that I really started to understand who Rory Stewart was, because it was 4 days after what happened in Israel. And basically, he had been asked by the audience of the podcast to do a potted history of the last 3,000 years of Israel, Palestine, Arabic history of the region in 3.5 minutes. And it was so good. Did I go play it now?
And to listeners this morning saying, what would you like to ask us about what's happening in the Middle East right now? And I can tell you the single most asked question was asking Rory for one of his explainers. Now, so take us from the beginning of time to where we are now in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and without getting in trouble from every side. I'll give it a go, and with apologies to people because there's a lot of sensitivities here. So essentially, going back 3,000 years, State of Israel was dominated by a Jewish community, and they were displaced just under 2,000 years ago, basically by the Romans. And large Jewish communities formed then in places like Iraq and Yemen, but also in Europe, Central Eastern Europe, and in Spain and Portugal, and in many other places too. And then at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, there was the beginnings of a Zionist movement pushing for a homeland for the Jewish people, driven by the fact that Jews had experienced appalling discrimination and brutal pogroms, murderous attacks on them over many, many hundreds of years, but mounting particularly in Central Eastern Europe in the late 19th century. The British got behind this with the Balfour Declaration about the time of the First World War, and there was increasing Jewish movement back to the former state of Israel. But of course, during the nearly 2,000 years, this had become very much a place dominated by Arab Muslim communities. So the Jews were moving back into a populated place. And the British, initially after the First World War, set up a mandate where they were trying to balance the interests of Arabs and Jews, found themselves in the middle of an increasing civil war. And the Brits were actually targets of terrorist attacks from both Arabs and Jews. And then, of course, the defining horror of the Second World War, the Holocaust, in which 6 million European Jews are killed, and which absolutely demonstrates to the world the extremity of the threat that Jews face.
See, it doesn't matter whatever your political colour is, whatever. He is so good at just making the most complex accessible, given the fact that Alistair Campbell challenged him to talk about Israel from the start of time until this point. And we're talking about obviously an extremely complex situation, which obviously we won't get into on this. This isn't the right place to do it. But he is very good at breaking it down and making it really accessible. And it feels like that's what he does through the course of this book as well.
We'll come back to this in a minute. But for me, the bit that impressed me and drew me in and actually made me subscribe and listen to their podcast, as usual, 1.5 years later than anybody else, and also to spend 16 hours with this book twice, is the bit where he basically said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to miss some bits out, I'm going to offend everybody, but I'm going to give it a go. And that was the bit where I went, this is somebody who I'd quite like to listen to and feel I can learn some stuff from.
He very much set the stall out, didn't he, right at the start of the book? This is what I'm going to be saying. This is who it's going to offend. They're right to be offended. These are the reasons why. But this stuff needs to be... Well, clearly he wouldn't have written it if he didn't think it needed to be told. And actually it was so illuminating into characters throughout the political last 5-10 years, who started off, as junior ministers and then rose to become prime minister. Talk about Liz Truss, there's Priti Patel in there. He talks about David Cameron, talks about Theresa May, and of course he talks about Boris.
So he's born in Hong Kong, so not the most conventional of upbringings. His father was governor of Malaysia in the old colonial style. He went to Eton and to Oxford. I was a bit confused about that because he also mentions at the beginning that he was a soldier at the age of 18 as well. So that was his first, what he considers to be government service. Then there came the whole early 20s where he was in Indonesia, Afghanistan and Nepal. This is what he says about his walk across Afghanistan.
I had been in Indonesia as a British diplomat for the fall of President Suharto in 1998 and had played a part in the international interventions in Bosnia and Kosovo and Afghanistan, and had spent a year and a half walking 20 to 25 miles a day across Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nepal.
I remember this. I remember Rory Stewart's complete journey while he, during the earlier years, but I remember when 24-hour news or the BBC News 24 had first started, and I was working overnights on the travel shift, and there was nothing else to watch except for ITV Night Screen, which is basically a glorified CFAX. And so I was watching rolling news, and it was constantly talking about the toppling of President Suharto and replaced by President Habibi. So, Rory, if you ever do come across this, just make sure I'm fact-checked there, okay, that's who he's replaced by.
Boris Johnson had been fired twice from jobs for lying, that he lied to many of us much of the time, that he had no eye for detail, had achieved close to nothing as Foreign Secretary, was entirely lacking in respect for public office, and was not notable for his seriousness or dignity.
So he obviously has a certain view of Boris, right?
Not a fan then.
Not a fan, and that pervades right throughout. But it's really interesting when the whole leadership challenge was going on. And actually listening to the book made me really re-engage with actually what happened at the time, because I kind of forgotten. I knew he went for the leadership challenge. I watched that debate. By the way, taken off the tie towards the end during our podcast, but I have got a tie, just so you know. For those who know, may remember. If you don't, then cut that out.
Actually, it comes in the book, doesn't it? He talks about what it was like to be the other side of the camera. As I say, at the time I thought, who's this little boy standing to up among all of these great grey suited minister types? He's a bit cocky, and yes, but he talks about how everything he did was misinterpreted. So he took off the tie to look casual. And because it was hot, and he thought it would be, so a Tony Blair type move, isn't it? But it turned out that was perceived as him having no respect for the proceedings and being a little offhand.
This is the thing, and this is probably where sort of looking back and the sort of debate it was. So this was, and this is the media that had a part to play in this as well, right? Because they're trying to make, certainly with places like the BBC, impartiality comes above all. The other thing they have to do is engage as many people in the discourse as possible. So they try and innovate in new ways of putting across these prime ministerial debates. So it's not just people behind a podium, but they do it in different ways. So in this particular debate, they were all on bar stools in this kind of crescent shape. There was no audience there. That makes a big deal. There's no people to talk to. There's people down the line on a video camera. And so what Rory Stewart describes there is, it sounds like the perfect storm. Everything that was about this debate was completely going against his favour. Where he was positioned in that crescent, he was the opposite end to Boris, so he couldn't really challenge him directly, he talks about how his microphone was muted when he tried to get points across, and he was trying to answer points. But I guess that would apply to every single politician. He was getting increasingly frustrated. He describes getting increasingly flustered, and towards the end, when Boris was kind of being broad brushstroke, should we say, about how we can achieve the absolute impossible and how everything is going to be fine. He took his tie off because he was just I think, from what I understand from the book, you might have taken something different, but it wasn't necessarily to look cool.
No.
I think it was towards the end of the session, or maybe over halfway, and he just realised that he's on a non-starter here because of everything about this debate, and he was being cut off, and Boris was just steamrolling over everybody, and he couldn't get his point across. And also, I imagine, because he felt so passionately about something like Brexit, everything that was happening to the country at the time, that there's so much riding on this, because it all depends on who's in charge at the top, right? The wind was blowing in Boris's direction, so it was him. It was going to be him as Prime Minister, but Rory Stewart had that chance. He was, before this debate, he was riding really high, really popular with young voters. He was big on social media. This is not a Rory Stewart fan club, by the way.
No,
he's describing this in the book, but he was in a really, really excellent position, and he talks in the book about how that debate absolutely took the rug from under him. And frankly, if the only thing he did was get rid of his tie, I'd just be getting up, slamming the stool on the floor, and just swearing at everyone and walking off.
I'm really glad you focused in on that one. We've accidentally ended up talking about it in the book. It is the first thing in the prologue, and it's basically the big action scene at the finish of the movie. It's the lasers and the car chases. So the book is built around that. It's built around, as you say, his disappointment at the state of politics and what you have to do to be an MP in between. I think we've got from the clips that we've played so far, whether you're politically aligned with him or not, there is a warmth and a sincerity to what he does. There is a depth that comes through, and he's a decent human being, shall we say, and quite warm. I think warm is the important bit, and there's a little bit of funny in there as well. You mentioned this earlier on, just as we were listening to one of the clips off air. You said that he reads it nice and slowly.
Yeah,
I disagree with you. I think at the beginning of the book, he's not that comfortable, and he's reading it a little slowly, and I find it a little stilted.
Millions of Afghan refugees were choosing to return home. All this seemed a much better trajectory than Iraq, and I credited it to foreigners staying out and keeping only a very light military footprint in Afghanistan.
Just on the way here, I was just listening back through when he reads out the chapter titles, and I thought he was reading them out so slowly because they're quite big words for people who need it read slowly, if you know what I mean, like me. But I found him. It's interesting actually because so I listened to the rest of his politics, and I listened to this audiobook. Obviously they're different styles. They're both audio, but they're one's conversational, and the other one is obviously reading from the written page. But you do in both of those, and we always talk about this on this podcast, is that the audiobook is so significantly different to the print version, because in the audiobook version, you can hear where this person is coming from, or the author of any book. You can hear where they're coming from. You can hear what they're like. They wrote the book. In this case, when we talk about authors reading their own books and so on, but in these cases, it's important for the author to read it. If they're recounting actual facts and how they perceive those facts, their intonation, or when they do their explainers and so on, really bring it to life. Actually, and it adds to the you either have a more firm opinion on whether you agree or disagree with them, if you know what I mean.
I do. I've forgotten the name of the one of the first books you and I ever reviewed was the chap who was an NHS doctor.
Yeah, Adam Kay. So
Adam
this is going to hurt,
Kay. Yeah, this is going to hurt. And he had a little interaction with us on the socials. And we said, what was it like recording the audiobook? And he said, it's a bit of a faff, which I think is an understatement. And we know that you see authors who have been asked to narrate their own audiobooks, going into the studio, and the first day you get a nice Instagram shot of the cup of tea and the little music stand where they've got their book, and then goes quiet after that, because it turns out that reading even your own book in your own words is not easy.
No.
And it takes a blooming long time. And where I've spent 16 hours listening to the book, it's taken a lot longer than that.
Are you suggesting it should have been 14 hours if he'd spoken a bit quicker?
No, I'm not being that harsh. And actually, my point is he actually warms up as the book goes on and he gets into it. So all those stilted clips come from a little earlier on in the book. And the one thing you don't get in the traditional pulped tree version of the book is, of course, he doesn't mind doing a bit of the mimicry.
He doesn't, does he? He loves an impression, doesn't he?
He likes an impression. So I thought, in order to perhaps explore the man's personality and stuff that we don't necessarily get from the written word, Steve, I might play you a couple of his impressions and see what you think.
Al Gore had been invited too, and these two tall presidential candidates with magnificent hair, the sonorous tone of Old Testament prophets, and white-toothed smiles designed to be seen by crowds of thousands, appeared a little big for a small sitting room and a gathering of 10. Over the main course, Kerry spoke for 20 minutes about Afghanistan, beginning with North Waziristan and the early 19th century Populzai Federation, and finished with, "But of course, Rory, you know much more about this than I do, and I should be listening to you." Before I could get a word in, however, still less suggest he might have confused Pushtu and Panjshir, he set off for another 10 minutes of, "We need to understand that what works in Mazar-e-Sharif, a predominantly Uzbek city that fought the Taliban tooth and nail in the 1990s, is very different from what works in Kandahar, a Pashtun city."
Wow.
It's courageous, isn't it?
He's courageous, yeah.
Sorry, that was John Kerry, not Al Gore, as you can tell from the impression itself.
Yes, well, no, completely. I could have, I mean, when you said Al Gore, I mean, what are you having a laugh? That's blatantly John Kerry.
Yeah,
He's good though. It does help. It does really help to actually have. I really appreciate, and a lot of authors do this actually. A lot of people who don't do impressions. Andrew Marr was another one on History of Modern Britain, and I think The Making of Modern Britain as well. He would do impressions of Lloyd George and other people, and Churchill, of course. And it's really good, but it does actually add to it. I mean, you've got to be careful though. So the producers of the audiobook, I mean, obviously in their infinite wisdom, will say actually, probably don't do an impression, or do the impression if actually it's good. I think it's quite a nice lilt he does with the accents there, and so you can kind of get away with it. So play us a few more.
I think you get where I'm going, and it can be quite exposing. So when I was away for 7 years, I was living in Adelaide in Australia, and you best believe I didn't do the accent. And there are a couple of accents, and I always find Northern Ireland and Scotland are the ones where those are the people who are going to be most offended if a toff like me tries to do the accent. So let's hear Rory Stewart's Londonderry accent, shall we?
In Londonderry, my guide was blunter. "Peace is not a state, it's a process. A journalist was shot in this town a month ago. Earlier this year, there was a car bomb here," he pointed. "Where are you standing now? Yesterday, a bomb was found under a policeman's car in Belfast."
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I think this is really. I think it's good. I think it's good to have that. It's really difficult because he's actually imparting a very heavy sentence there, talking about car bombs, and this is the awful things that happened in Northern Ireland at the time. And so this is where I guess, I don't know if Rory Stewart relied on it, but you've got to have a really, really good audiobook producer, because you're looking to them to guide you, to sort of say, do an accent, don't do an accent, given I mean, we could come off the back of that clip and go, oh, God, he could be the next Ballykiss Angel or whatever, for those who know from the early 2000s or late 90s. But the thing is that it's a really heavy subject he's covering there. And so whether you put an accent on, do an impression of...
I don't think you need to do the accent. So one of the things that I always think is some people do it really well with a gentle little... Cadence is a very important word.
Cadence.
And indeed, I'm going to lead by example here. as the 1980s comedian Jimmy Cricket would have said, and there's more.
Finally, a door was opened by a large man in shorts with veined biceps and a tight white t-shirt. "Ah," he said, "I've been waiting for you. I'd like to talk to the candidate, please." I smiled and called the candidate over. "Another corrupt MP, eh?" he began. "Up to your snout in the expenses scandal. What are you claiming for at the moment? Your bath plug? Your Walkman? Probably claiming for visiting me, no?" No, the candidate explained quickly. I'm not an MP yet. I'm just waiting your chance then, eh? In training? What are you going to buy first? I'm as disappointed as you are. Are you now? I am. Are you now, indeed? That's right. If I'm elected Conservative, Mrs. Thatcher, eh? You're going to ride police horses into the face of the working man? No, I don't know how you sleep at night, the man said with joyful finality and closed the door with a bang.
That impression went down with a bang. That was really good. I mean, that's because of course Rory Stewart is
That's two impressions, by the way.
Was Scottish heritage.
Did you get the two characters in that?
Yeah, what, Rory Stewart and the Scotsman?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I think so. Was there another one?
There was a lady. He was doing a lady. Did you not notice he did a lady?
He was doing a lady.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Maybe.
You look embarrassed for him,
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah.
As Meatloaf said, and Meatloaf is never wrong.
Right, now...
apart from that.
One final one.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is you never do the accent in front of the people.
Never do the accent in front of the people.
Where are you from?
I'm from Essex.
Good. Right. Well, here he is doing an impression of the MP for Chelmsford.
The former chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee gave us a recap of Holbrook's 3-year-old AFPAC strategy, informing us sonorously, "What we are dealing with in Afghanistan is not just about Afghanistan. It is also about Pakistan."
It's not all about Towie, is it? You know, because contrary to what people say about the Essex accent, we do use consonants and don't just talk in vowels. Thank you very much indeed as well.
Yeah, you're not happy with that.
Thanks, Rory. Yeah,
well,
appreciate
again,
it.
This is the thing. So is it an added extra of reason of joy, or is it actually a little insight into perhaps he's revealed a little too much about how he thinks and feels? And apart from swearing and bodily fluids, the thing that you find most uncomfortable that I do on this podcast is try and start conversations with you about class. And
yes. This is the class section of the podcast.
This is the class section of the podcast because it makes Steve uncomfortable. And look, I'm as I say, I'm a toff. I wear white privilege patent leather shoes. You know,
Yeah.
But I'd get slightly concerned. I don't do the accent in front of people, particularly as a white male, Southern English Londoner, all of those things, because it's perceived as patronising.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder why you haven't been hit before. I'm sure you have done this.
Yeah.
I'm certain you have done this. I've been out with you in the at night.
Never on tape.
Never on tape. No, that's true. Yeah,
but the whole point is that Rory Stewart very fairly tries to convey that, you know, he's a bit uncomfortable. All of these people went to Eton. You know, they're all a bit the same, but we're a bit different, some of us, because we were born in Hong Kong. But I think in the sum total of all those impressions played together, while you think, oh, it's nice that he's made the effort to make the impression, underneath it, you can understand why people might find him a little patronising. I love the book. As I say, I'm really glad that we haven't been hit by fairy godmother Anne Bond, who pushes the buttons on this for us.
Thanks,
and she was worried that it was going to be some sort of, you know, single-minded, you know, as you said, a party political broadcast on the behalf of the Rory Stewart party. But I think there's stuff there that I look at it and I go, I can understand why people might be uncomfortable with you being a bit of a Tory toff. I'm going to play you one last clip that is my evidence for this. Scottish clip where he was out with the volunteers and went and knocked on the door and the big man in the vest came to the door. That was after a series of them trying to find people to talk to in the pouring rain in Scotland with the volunteers. And he said that, you know, basically one of his volunteers came back and hadn't managed to find anybody for the candidate to talk to. And this is how he summed that up.
The volunteer trotted back, with the air of a spaniel who has failed to retrieve a duck.
I just think that's not kind of an analogy that I would use. You know, that's not the first thing I think of with a sad face. Is when I go hunting, and my spaniel hasn't found my duck. I think there's a little bit where, as much as as much as he's down with the kids, I don't think he's necessarily comes across as 100% from the real world. Is that fair, Steve?
I don't know. I think if he was going to have a go at this guy who hadn't been able to get anyone for him to speak to, then it sounds like he was disappointed. The guy came back disappointed that he couldn't find someone for him to speak to. But yes, no. I mean, I have to say, as someone who comes from Essex and comes from the background I've come from, East London, Essex, I haven't generally used the phrase. For example, if you were to approach me and you disappointed me, I would never have said, you have all the gait of a spaniel who has failed to find its duck. And that's not a euphemism. So that was Politics on the Edge, a memoir by Rory Stewart, narrated by the author, 16 hours and 20 minutes. It's unabridged. It was released last September by Penguin Audio, and one of our major recommendations. It's really sold like hotcakes. So yeah, go get. Next time.
I don't know if I've mentioned this, Steve, but I've been away.
Yes, you've been away. You have all the look of a wizened traveller.
Thank you very much. Yeah. But I've got quite good skin for a man of my age. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have, yeah.
So we haven't nailed down exactly when the next podcast will be coming. We're aiming to get up to one a week in season 2. And we have several things in the planning diary, and we've sent emails to people asking them to come on for an interview with us. I have a little list of things here that are coming up in terms of titles. Funnily enough, Rory Stewart in his book quotes journalist Raphael Bear. And you will see, if you look at my Twitter account, that me and Raph, who went to school together, have been having a little chat about his new book that comes out in June this year, and whether there's going to be an audiobook version. So we might, apparently it's all dependent on budget. So I'll try and catch up with him. I'm desperate to talk about Skippy the beer can, which is the main character in Expeditionary Force, a series of books by Craig Allenson. He's an elder AI intelligence in the shape of a beer can who draws energy from another universe, and if you are really good and clever, he'll tell you, go get a juice box.
It was only a matter of time before that was going to come out, I suppose.
Well, exactly. I think it's a documentary. Our wonderful production assistant, Charlotte's mother, Paula, has recommended to us The Passage by Justin Cronin. I have done my time with that book. I also want to do things that go a bit beyond audiobooks. So I'm a user of Headspace, and that is a piece of audio that you use to achieve a certain purpose.
Andy Puddicombe.
I'd love to speak to him.
I'd love to have him on just so I can say his surname a lot. It's a brilliant surname, yeah.
But since we've been away, the market has moved. When we were here, it was Audible, and that was your only choice. But now Spotify are they have an audiobook offering. I want to see what we think that's like to use, and maybe get someone from there on. And also, now we're both in London, maybe we do get a chance to go and have a chat with Audible and see whether they'll let us interview some of the people who are involved in producing, writing, or performing their big titles. So
even
fingers crossed.
Even security, which I imagine will be the first people we do speak to when we go to their offices.
We'll record us getting turned away at reception.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Yeah.
There's also a thing about a bloke who I met from Syria, who, when he was a kid, used to listen to audiobooks from basically pirated CDs, and he has a version of Vincent Price doing Frankenstein on a CD that's totally illegal that I really want to listen to, and find out how other people listen to audiobooks as well.
Oh, I've got one for you as well then.
Go on.
And I've been trying to get hold of this, and it's only because I saw a tweet from Danny Baker, and he talked about the greatest audiobook ever.
Ooh.
Who on earth is Tom Baker? So this is Tom Baker's autobiography, and he said it's the greatest listen. I haven't been able to find it anywhere. It's not on Audible.
Okay.
If anyone knows how you can get hold of Who on Earth is Tom Baker. I just really want to listen to.
Maybe this would, I know we're a bit rusty, but maybe this would be a good point to tell people how they can get in touch with us, Steve.
If you want us to review an audiobook, just include the hashtag Audiobook Club on all the socials. We're there. We'll pick it up. We'll review it for you. That's the way you get in touch with us. We're on Instagram. We're on X. We're on all the things. Facebook, everywhere. Thanks to our producer, Anne Bond, our production assistant, Charlotte Thomas, and our technical dude, Kai. Until next time, happy listening.